Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. My disclaimer is the views of the guests that you will hear in the interview may not represent those of the station or the host. Always seek your primary care physician's advice for any medical concerns. I am very excited to talk with my guest today. What an inspirational story my guest has. My guest is Jesse Fiedor. He is author and writer of the book Angels from Heaven. He is a public speaker as well as a guest speaker at the World Famous Crystal Cathedral. He talks all over. He is a motivational speaker on overcoming obstacles and how he overcame his disability. Jesse has a rags to riches story, which I can't wait to hear. I want to welcome you, Jesse Fiedor, to Chatting with Betsy.
Well, thank you very, very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you are welcome. It's my privilege and honor to have you on. I love the name of your title of your book, Angels from Heaven. What inspired you to write your book? I'll start with that because that's what I ask all my authors.
Well, what really inspired me was I really wanted to help others that are in similar or worse situation in their lives where that's what I wanted to do is explain how I overcame quite a bit in my life and to just be thankful for what has happened over my lifetime, and to influence and really to motivate people to never give up on life and never give up on their dreams. Meaning, if you can dream it, you can do it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I also forgot to say in my intro that Jesse worked in Hollywood on Hollywood sets such as The Golden Girls. And you overcame your disability. You had epilepsy.
That's correct.
In the 50s and 60s, that was kind of like, I'm going to say taboo. I'm sure you had a lot of stigma associated with having epilepsy and growing up at that time. That had to be difficult for you.
Oh, it was extremely difficult, and I actually get emotional talking about it sometimes.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Because
I get emotional
I
myself
sometimes. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came down with epilepsy at the age of 10, and then when that basically came upon me, it was I got it by being hit in the head with a baseball when I was up at bat playing Little League baseball, and from age 10 all the way up until age 23, 24, most of my life was just living in hospitals, institutions, going through grand-mal-seizures on a daily basis, and not expected to live at all because once you have so many grand-mal-seizures, it just destroys the brain cells, and a life cannot continue with grand-mal-seizures on a consistent basis like I had them. And then I spent 2 years in a boys' home. I spent several months in a Camarillo mental hospital, which was the wrong place for me at the time. But most of my life was just hospitals, institutions, and basically walking the streets doing nothing.
Jesse, were you placed in these like at a boys' home, a mental hospital, because you had epilepsy? Or did the doctors recommend that for you, for your parents?
Well, what had happened when I was put into the mental hospital, that was at age 10, I should say, and it was the reason that I was put into a mental hospital is not because I was mentally insane or anything of the sort. It was because my grand-mal-seizures were getting very, very severe. And when you're having a grand-mal-seizure, that means that you could end up, hitting your head, knocking yourself out, and killing yourself. So the reason that they put me into a mental hospital is because the mental hospitals have floor-to-ceiling padded cells. So they put me in a padded cell, more or less, to keep me from killing myself when I was having a grand-mal-seizure. It was really a mistake, as I know today, because that's not where I should have been. But the reason that I was there is that, you know, you can't really stop a seizure once it happens, and
right.
You can't be with somebody 24 hours a day. So that's why I was put it there. And then when I spent 2 years in a boys' home, the reason I was put there is because epilepsy also has different effects, I should say, on an individual, and that's where I became emotionally disturbed. And when I became emotionally disturbed, I had to be put into a separate boys' home to really, I guess, say, cure the emotional disturbance. And I spent 2 years in a boys' home called Lakeside Lodge in Elsinore, California.
Wow, Jesse, my heart, I have to say this. I mean, I'm an emotional person, too, so it's okay if you get emotional. I've cried during many interviews, let me tell you. It really breaks my heart because I want to put in perspective for the audience, especially of young people. There were not the medications back then that there are now to prevent grand-mal-seizures. You know, back in the old, and I'm talking the old days, like probably like I remember my dad even telling me and even reading this, people who had epilepsy were considered to be demon-possessed and were chained down in the basement or up in the attic. And, you know, of course, this is old school thinking. I even remember in high school, there was this, in high school, and I was in a cooking class, and I was wondering why they wouldn't let this guy go near the stove. He was the only boy in cooking class that wasn't allowed to, like, do the grill. And he wouldn't tell me why. And one day I saw him take a pill. And then I put it, and I said, "Oh, are you taking drugs, Mark?" And then it was like years later, it had occurred to me, I bet he had epilepsy and was taking his medication.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good story of basically what was happening at that time, because similar things happened to myself. I mean, I've been seen taking my medication at that time, and they called the police on me because they said that I was taking drugs. And
yes, and
I was kicked out of restaurants because of I actually had a seizure in a restaurant, and they asked me. I was escorted out by 2 Marines, and it's only because I had a seizure. And I came back. I came back the following week, and then they said, "We don't allow epileptics in here. Get out of here." See?
Oh my goodness, that's awful. I had to tell this story, Jesse, because a babysitter. I was young. I forgot how old I was. She had a seizure. She was babysitting us. I never saw anyone have a seizure. I was like, I don't know, maybe I was 7 or 8 years old. And she was on the concrete. She had, I guess, had fallen down. Her face was bloody. And I think my sister ran and got her parents, and she was in the hospital. And I thought my parents were going to be in trouble. But I heard that she had a seizure. That was the first time I saw a seizure, and that was scary. But I did work in a state institution for the severely disabled, and they did have grand-mal-seizures. And if you're not used to seeing that, it can be quite frightening for a lay, for someone who's not used to it. And you know, they had the old school thinking, you know, they swallow their tongue, and, you know, we would give, what did we give, Valium or phenobarbital, whatever the doctor had ordered. They would have to get an injection, and if that didn't work, we called a squad. Because as you know, you can't have a grand-mal for 10 minutes. You're going to have, you could die or stop breathing, have some serious issues. Yeah, have some serious issues. It just is so emotional for me to think of what you went through and where you are today. That how did you get from where you were going to, these mental hospitals because you had epilepsy to working in Hollywood?
Well, that was a long journey.
Yes.
What happened is that after my hospitalizations, etc., and then when I was 23 years of age, I had nothing happening with my life. I was just basically walking the streets, doing nothing with my life, not attending school. I graduated from high school at an early age of 19, but continuation school because my comprehension course really goes down when you have brain damage. So I was ditching classes a lot because I was afraid of having a seizure in front of any students, and they're just going to blackball me from the room or whatever. So, but when I turned 23, that's when my life took a 380-degree turnaround, because my mother she was attending what's called Garden Grove Community Church, later on known as the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California, and she decided to pick me up one Sunday because I can't drive. I'm not able to drive with epilepsy. She would pick me up from living with my dad because we didn't live together. They were divorced at the time. So she came by, picked me up, and took me to church. She started taking me to church, and then what happened is my life started dramatically changing over time. And I kept attending because I had an antisocial personality. I was not basically facing reality, I should say. I had never been around people. I had no one to talk to, no one to be with. I was so lonely. And through the treacherous times of my grand-mal-seizures, I had suicide attempts. I almost died 3 times, and I just couldn't take it no more. So when I started going to church with my mother, that's when my life started changing, and that's when everything started changing for the worse. I'm sorry, I'm saying everything started changing for the better. I said that wrong. And
that's okay.
And then what happened there is too many miracles happened at that time. I have time to tell you all of them. So just to summarize what I can tell you is that I had no college education. But what happened is it took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree, which I wouldn't give up because I had 3rd grade comprehension when I started attending college. But I never gave up. And then the last seizure that I had was 44 years ago, and the last seizure I had was at the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. I've never had one since, and I've been off the medication for 33 years. And
wow.
I am cured from epilepsy, mostly because of my faith in God.
That's amazing. That is, I'm about ready to burst into, I'm getting verklempt here myself, Jesse. That is such a story of determination, and you have grit, Jesse. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. To feel that lonely. I bet you felt ostracized. And to try suicide 3 times, God wasn't going to let you go. God had a plan for you.
Yes, He did.
And, God is using you to use your story and what you went through to help other people. And this is why I love to do my show, Jesse. And this is why I love to have people on who came out the other side, because I want people to know they're not alone. They can get through their struggles because other people have. When they hear stories like yours, Jesse, it gives people hope. I really believe that. It really gives people the hope that, you know what, it took you 8 years to get a college degree, but you didn't give up. And
That's
didn't
right.
you go to England? You went to England, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yes. What happened is I had to walk to school, like 5 miles to school, 5 miles back, day and night, because I couldn't drive. I was not able to drive because you can't get a license with epilepsy,
right,
unless you've been free of seizures for 2 years. But eventually I did get a car. I got a license. I finished 8 years of college, and during that period of time when I was going to college, I just saw a flyer one time at Cal State Fullerton, where I graduated from, and it said why not go to or join the communications department and come to school in London, England. So what I did is I didn't have any money because I was only living on disability of $267 a month, and that's all I was getting. But I managed to do that. I borrowed $2,500 from a student loan, and I went to England not knowing at all what I was doing because I'd really never traveled before. And that's quite a story in my book on explaining how I got to England with $467 to my name, and how I survived going to a semester in school. I worked with the British Broadcasting Corporation and the IPA in London, England. And I did that, again, starting with $467. It's amazing because on the way I did it, but after attending a school in London, England, it was I came back to the United States with 25 cents to my name. But I would never give up. And just the accomplishments that I've gone through are so amazing that it's from where I was with epilepsy, walking the street, homeless, technically living off of $267 a month, and waiting to die because I was having multiple grand-mal-seizures. From what I've now accomplished in my life is it really total miracle, and that's why I want to influence and tell others that they can do the same if they're in a similar or worse situation than I was in.
Yes, and your story is very inspiring and motivating. You know, I see people who have gone through like an experience of caregiving, and they don't know what to do with themselves. And a lot of people feel sorry for themselves, Jesse. You know that. And even though you had every right to feel sorry for yourself at the time and things that you were going through, but you persevered. You had and you know eventually had faith in God, and you just hung in there. You walked 5 miles to college.
Oh yes. I walk a lot farther than that. But,
wow.
Yeah.
Think of that, folks. Think of that. Jesse walked 5 miles one way to go to college. That's how determined he was to get an education. That speaks volumes of your character, Jesse. You really did have the strength in you and such motivation that that's just, you know, that just is mind-boggling to me, because that really shows what strength and motivation you had to do that. You know, kids today, they don't even want to walk a block to go to school. But that is so amazing. And how did you get onto like working on the Hollywood sets? Are you in the lighting department? What did you do?
Well, how it all started is that when I was going to college, I should say, I wanted to pick a a major where I wouldn't have to use a lot of my brain power. In other words, a lawyer or something like that takes a lot of reading and brain power. I just didn't want to do something. I wanted to do something where I could use my hands, because I'm much better at not reading and studying, because that's why it took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree, because I had to keep rereading and reading it, everything, before I could actually take a test, because if I took a test after reading it once, I'm going to fail. So what I did is I decided to go into communications, broadcasting, and then I know I could use my hands a lot. So what had happened is one day at the Crystal Cathedral, I was in the singles group at the time, and then they were losing their sound man because he was moving out of state, and they had no one else to do it. They were looking for volunteers, but what happened is I forgot my coat when I left that day, and I came back to get my coat, and I was asked to join the meeting, and then they mentioned that they needed a sound person. I had no idea who to get, and then somebody mentioned they mentioned, well, what about Jesse? And I said, I don't know anything about sound. And they said that they would teach me, of course. And that's how I made my decision to go into broadcasting and audio. So what happened is I took that major, finished my degree, got my my bachelor's degree in communications in radio, television, and broadcasting, and then I got to figure out how am I going to get into Hollywood now. Well, my dad always taught me, he said, you got to do things out of the ordinary that will stand out and not put you in the same category as everyone else, meaning at that time I didn't want to go apply for a job, fill out an application, and then wait for them to call me. So I started getting more familiar with Hollywood by driving up there and going places in Hollywood. And then I joined an organization called NABIT, National Association of Broadcasting Employees and Technicians. And when I did that, I was called into different studios. I first started out with Whit Thomas Productions, working on It's a Living, One Big Family, Saved by the Bell.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember that one.
What happened is that I really wanted to get into the motion picture industry, which is separate from television, but I wanted to get in, and I started getting names of people. And then when I got the names, I just started calling, not consistently, so I'd be a nuisance, but what happened, I wanted to get to work in the major studios such as 20th Century Fox and or Disney. And with my determination and persistence, eventually what happened is I got into 20th Century Fox, sure enough, and I did get a job there working at 20th Century Fox. But then my goal was to really get into Disney, Walt Disney Studios. So I said, I got to figure out how to do this. And then I did find a contact in Disney Studios. So what I decided to do is something totally out of the ordinary and different. I sent the individual a letter with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, not painted, but it was drawn by my father because he was an artist, and it was Mickey Mouse filming Minnie Mouse. And then, of course, I had a typed letter before that, right? And Mickey and Minnie are down at the bottom of the letter, telling me of how I'm interested in working for the studio. And then they were saying to each other, Minnie, it sure was hard getting into Disney Studios. And we always kept getting a no. And then Minnie would say, she said, yeah, Mickey, but for every no that we got, we came that much closer to a yes.
Wow.
And then we finally got in.
Wow.
So, and that was my first letter. And then my second letter was Donald Duck and Daisy Duck. And then my third letter was Goofy. And, I can't remember the other one, but I just kept on sending letters like that, and then finally Disney called me, and they asked me to come in for an interview. I came in for an interview. The 3 letters were laying right there on the desk when I came in, and they said, we've never had nobody do this before, ever, and your creativity was what we wanted to see. And because of that, we'd like to interview for you this job. And that's how I got into Disney.
That's so incredible, Jesse. That shows, again, determination, perseverance, grit, and I'm sure you had the faith. This is why I had to tell this to the audience. You're gonna hear no. You're going to hear no. Many people have heard no. Jesse heard no many times. J.K. Rowling heard no. Many actors, actresses have heard no. And look where they are today. And, you have to have that, I guess, you do have to have some kind of determination and grit and really a strength to just say, you know what, I'm going to keep going for this. I believe in my dream. This is what I want, and I'm going to keep trying. That is true perseverance, and that is just I admire that in people to say, oh no, I'm not going to give up. This is what I really want. That is just an incredible story. And how long did you work on the Golden Girls set?
Well, Golden Girls, what happened is that Golden Girls was filmed at Sunset Gower Studios, which was really technically around the corner from Whit Thomas Productions, maybe about half a mile. And while I was at Whit Thomas Productions, then what happened is I decided to go over. I was sent over, I should say, to Sunset Gower Studios by Whit Thomas to pick some sets up, I should say. And then when I got back over to Sunset Gower, then what happened is I started talking with people over there because, again, they weren't filming at the time that I was there, but I started talking. I started getting to know the people there, and I wanted to expand my contact list, I should say. And sure enough, because I was a part of NABIT, they did call me up and ask me if I could go over to the Golden Girls set. And I said, be glad. So after the Whit Thomas Productions was completed over there for the season, I should say, then I went over to Sunset Gower Studios and I worked on the Golden Girls. And one of my biggest, memories of working at the Golden Girls was when the Golden Girls was being filmed, it's in front of a live audience. So what had happened is during a filming, in walks this lady, red hair, white pants, red blouse, and sandals. She walks in, sits in the bleachers, and of course everybody knew who she was, and as soon as she walked in, I walked up to the bleachers and sat right next to her just to talk with her. Back then we didn't have cell phones, so I couldn't take a picture, and it was Lucille Ball.
Wow.
So I got to see Lucille Ball, and I actually shook her hand, so it was nice to see Lucy because I grew up watching her.
Yeah.
And then it paid, I should say, to be on the Golden Girls set because, it was really entertaining and they were such nice people.
Yeah, I still watch repeats of the Golden Girls. I mean, that's such classic comedy that will never be outdated, and they would just all seemed. Did they really all get along on the set?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They were such sweethearts, but it was a wonderful time. There's some events, I guess, that took place, not events, I should say, but things that took place like when we were breaking for lunch the crew would always end up sitting on the outsides, while the stars, I should say, are inside in their dressing rooms. And sometimes Betty White would come out, and she'd say, like, I just wanted to know if you guys got enough food and you're all taken care of. If not, you just let Betty know. Such a sweetheart.
Yeah.
As all of them were, though.
Yeah. I saw her film back in, January. The Focus, what was it called? They had the documentary for her birthday, and she had just passed away. That was really good, and she seemed like such a lovely person. I mean, they all seemed very nice, but I think like Betty White to me stands out because she seemed like maybe she was more the friendlier of the four of them, but they very talented women, and that had to be such a great experience for you to work with them.
Oh, it was. And then during my period of time, that's why I decided to write the book that I wrote, Angels from Heaven, because the reason I call it Angels from Heaven is because of all the people that I met along the way on this journey of going through epilepsy, being cured, going through suicides, going through the terrible times that I went through, and just seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. It was the angels from heaven that came across my path when I was going on this journey, and they were total strangers out of the blue. I can't go into detail because it'd be too long, but just to give you one example, when I first started college, I remember it very well. I signed up for 3 classes. At the end of the 3 classes on that semester, I had 1 withdrawal, 1 incomplete, and I completed 1 unit. Now, most people would probably give up after that, but no, I continued on for the remaining 8 years with 2 degrees, Associate of Arts and a bachelor's. But there was a student in class. He was a Chinese student, and he could see that I was not really a student that's going to be going anywhere with, because I did nothing. He says to me after class, he said, I notice you don't take any notes and you don't ask any questions. He says, why is that? And then he asked me if I wanted to go over to the snack bar with him, and he bought me a hot dog because I didn't have very much money. But we sat and talked for a while, and I opened up, and I told him I have a very severe case of epilepsy, and I just live with fear, knowing that I might have a seizure at any time in the class. So it's hard for me. So just out of the blue, he took me over to the counselor of the school. He asked me to go and get this counselor taken care of. The counselor then spoke with me, and they took me over to the psychiatrist of the school. I went through 6 sessions with the psychologist. I think it was a psychologist, and they ended up putting me into a different category and said that I was trying to make it through college with a 3rd grade comprehension, and that I was really not faced with reality. But I would have never done that on my own, but a total stranger comes out of nowhere. And then that Chinese student, he gave me a book saying how to go through college the right way.
Wow.
So he was my first angel from heaven.
I definitely believe that, Jesse. We do have our earth angels. I have a couple myself, so I understand. Did you go for any, because I know back then mental health was not talked about, going for counseling and therapy was not talked about back then, but did you go for any counseling?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, I'm a big mental health advocate, Jesse, and because no one knows what life has in store for them, and anyone at any time may need to see a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and there's I want people to know there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I need help handling my life. And it's not a sign of weakness. And especially with men and boys and men, we need to start raising them where they can feel comfortable to express emotions. I'm very big on that. Feel very strongly about that. Yes.
Yep. I like to just explain to people how I never gave up, and the accomplishments that I've made. You know, there are so many of them. I mean, I was never a world traveler, but I decided that I wanted to see the world, and I just wouldn't give up. And as of today, I've seen all of the 14 wonders of the world. And
wow.
I've been to every single continent. And I did a lot of that just living on disability income sometimes. So
wow.
I try to really, one of my mentors that I always keep in mind is Helen Keller.
Mm-hmm.
Helen Keller was blind, deaf, and dumb. But she ended up getting a master's degree through college. So
yes.
If she can do it, I can do it.
Yes. It's incredible. I just interviewed someone who has cerebral palsy, and she has a podcast. She is phenomenal. And I'll be interviewing someone next year who also has cerebral palsy, who snowboards, wrote books, has a business, and, you know, it's just people who have disabilities, they have every right to be out in public and to do their thing, and without people judging them. There's such stigma, Jesse, as you know, surrounding so many disabilities that it has to stop. So I use my voice, my show is a megaphone for the world. You know, I always say, think about how you would want to be treated. How would you want to be treated if you're in a wheelchair? Would you want to be talked over? Would you want to be ignored just because you're in a wheelchair? Of course not. Well, neither does that person. And I just really want to bring awareness to how people feel when they are stigmatized. And you have quite a story, Jesse. I mean, I'll tell you what, I salute you because you really have quite an inspiring story of not giving up. And you became a millionaire, from what I read.
Well, that's correct. But I really enjoy sharing my money and whatever else that I have with people that are sick. That's why I love to give to charities. And I go to church every Sunday, of course, because I owe my life, I should say, to starting church and going to the church that my mother took me to. If that would have never happened, I probably would have been gone a long time ago.
Now, so you were blessed.
The Lord that did it. Oh, absolutely. And I was blessed by all of the angels that He sent to me. The 44-year journey that I had from where I started attending the Crystal Cathedral to where I am now, it's just a total miracle. And I want people to read and understand how I did it so they can, if they're in a similar circumstances, they can overcome it with goodwill, perseverance, and faith. Yep.
Yes. Yes. You had your hard times, and, you know, it made you, I'm sure, a very compassionate person. You have empathy, and you have understanding, and you can help. And I know you've helped many people with your story. And that's why I think, I heard one time, and I forgot who the guy was, he said, instead of asking, why me, why is this happening to me, ask yourself, why not? Maybe you're not seeing the bigger picture. God sees the bigger picture ahead of us. So sometimes we go through some tough stuff, to become better people to help others, that other people can be helped by our stories. That's why I love when people share stories. I love human interest stories, especially like yours, Jesse. I get inspired by it. I get thrilled by it, hearing of a person who is, you've been blessed after you had such tragedy in your life. And you could have really, you could have successfully committed suicide, but God didn't. God intervened. It wasn't your time. It wasn't your time. He had plans for you, and I do believe that. And I just think that you are just a walking testimony of having faith in God, and just being an inspiration and I could see where you're a motivational speaker. It was just so great talking to you. What advice would you give a young person today who has epilepsy?
Well, even though that they state that there is no cure for epilepsy, which is true, there is no cure. Well, it can be where you may not think that there's a cure, but again, if you have faith in God and prayers, that I'm sure that He's going to answer those prayers someday. And with all of the medical technology that's happening today, epilepsy is controlled a lot more than today than it was in my time.
Yes.
And they have much better remedies, I should say, for controlling epilepsy and hopefully eliminating it too. Because someday there will be a cure, but in my day, I guess there was my cure, which was the Lord thy God. I just kept my faith, and that's how I was cured, I believe, because, again, the tragedy that I went through with grand-mal-seizures, I mean, that's really difficult to even stay alive at that point.
Yes.
But there was one quote that stood with me all the time, all these years, that came from our pastor, Dr. Robert Schuller. And he said that he would say this a lot sometimes in his sermons: tough times never last, but tough people do. So
I like
tough,
that.
You can be tough and you can survive. Mm-hmm.
Tough times never last, but tough people do. I like that.
Yep.
That's true.
Like
yeah.
Vince Lombard also said, a quitter never wins and a winner never quits. Okay. So I stuck with those over my time, and I just said I'm not giving up. And sure enough, I didn't.
Yes, I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you came on my show to share your story. I'm glad you wrote your book. I think that it's a phenomenal story that you have, Jesse, and I really wish you much success with people buying your book. Where can people buy your book, Jesse?
Well, my website for that is angelsfromheaven.site, SITE, and that's where the book is published through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, and starting, I guess, in January, it will be noted internationally because I've been invited to be on the 700 Club in West Virginia.
Oh, yeah, 700 Club. Yeah, I used to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another miracle of what happened and how I even got on that show. But
yeah.
It's I always try to emphasize that never quit on what it is that you're doing. And again, if you have a dream, you can do it. I think Walt Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it. Yeah. So just have faith in God and never give up on what His plan is for you.
That's right. Well, you know what? Walt Disney was told he wasn't creative.
Yeah.
Walt Disney was turned down.
Yes, he was.
right? That's on living
Exactly.
creative, and look what he created. I mean, it's just something like Clint Eastwood. I think he was turned down too. Said,
absolutely.
Actor. I mean, you hear of musicians that were turned down over and over again, and they have become very successful. And I'm sure the people who turned them down are probably kicking themselves now because they missed out. And I just think that, you do have to have determination and grit and not give up. And I really thank you for coming on and sharing your story. So if people want to get in touch with you, Jesse, they go on your website?
Yes, they can go on the website, angelsfromheaven.site, S-I-T-E. And the book that is there, it's Angels from Heaven, My Miraculous Cure from Epilepsy. Because I believe there's two books there, but mine is my Angels from Heaven, My Miraculous Cure from Epilepsy. That's basically sold, I should say, on many websites, but most of the time it's from Amazon.
Okay. And they can get it like a international Amazon if somebody's in another part of the country?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Great.
You can go on the website too, angelsfromheaven.site. You can get that, and it takes you right to. It's got my biography. You can read a few of the pages. It's got Kindle. It's got the paperback book. I just started an audio book, so it's also an audio book. And now I'm on I guess discussions with another media company, and they're wanting to make a Christian movie.
Wow. Oh, that would be wonderful. And I could say I interviewed you when they make it into a movie. Oh, that would be wonderful. I'll tell you what, if you get a movie made about your life, Jesse, I want you to come back on my show because I want to help promote it.
Well, I can tell you right now that I will. If I get turned down by 100 people or 100 production companies, then I'm going to go to 101, and I won't stop until it's done.
There you go. That's right. That your story would definitely be a great movie. I could see Kirk Cameron playing you.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It was such an honor, Jesse, to talk to you. Folks, go on Amazon, go on Jesse Fiedor's website. Jesse's last name is Fiedor, if I'm reading my handwriting correctly. And the name of the book is Angels from Heaven. So you said you have two books? Is one Angels from Heaven, and then another one is?
No, one is, I don't have two books. There's another book there. It's called Angels from Heaven. But this one is Angels from Heaven, My Miraculous Cure from Epilepsy.
Okay.
That's my book.
My Miraculous Cure from Epilepsy.
Yeah,
okay.
You would go right to it with Angels from Heaven.site, S-I-T-E.
Well, thank you so much, Jesse Fiedor, for coming on, sharing your story. I wish you were in front of me because I would give you a hug. So I'm sending you a virtual hug.
Thank you so much. I'll send it right back.
Thank you. You are an inspiration. Folks, you know what? Sometimes, Jesse, I get to a point where, I just want to tell people, stop feeling sorry for yourself and look at these other people who are doing something. People don't understand, but I understand. I will be 65, so I know back when you were growing up, epilepsy wasn't accepted, folks. It was stigmatized. And I could see why, you were in these places and you were ostracized because that's what people did back then. It wasn't right Of course it wasn't right, but they didn't know any better, and that's how it was. And now it's much more acceptable. Children with epilepsy go to school, and they have nurses. They know how to handle seizures. And, you know, if you have never seen a grand-mal-seizure, it is scary. I used to see them all the time where I worked. It can be scary. And I just want to put in perspective for young people because, you know, we're talking about another time. Now it's more accepted. And this is the way it should have always been, but it wasn't. And I always say, Jesse, therefore, by the grace of God, go I. Because, you know, like I said, no one knows what life has in store for them. I had a coworker say to me, because I couldn't pick up the cots because of fibromyalgia and my back, and she said, well, you shouldn't work here. And I said to her, I said, you know what? You don't know what life has in store for you. I worked as a nurse, but I can't work as a nurse anymore because I can't see too well, you know, with reading the medications, and I didn't want to hurt anybody. So I went into working in the preschool. Nobody knows that you might have to change careers because of something, you know, with your health. And, you know, you said you worked with your hands. There's nothing wrong. We need people to work with our hands. We need electricians, plumbers, bakers, and that's, I believe you're still using your brain when you're using your hands. We need people in all professions doing all types of jobs. And I want to thank you. Excuse me. I want to thank you for sharing your story, and I believe God will continue to bless you as you serve Him. And I want to thank you for sharing your story of faith and just determination and grit. And I really do admire you and having the courage to tell your story. And I think just showing your deep emotion, it's just, you're a beautiful person, Jesse. You are a beautiful man, beautiful soul.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and I can tell that. And
you're wonderful in what you're doing, too, and I really wish to thank you for having me on your show. And I will be getting back with you, not if, but when the movie is made.
Yes, please do. Thank you so much, Jesse, for coming on. Folks, you heard Jesse Fiedor. You're welcome. Highly recommend the book. You want a book to give for the holidays of inspiration and faith, and I would go on Amazon or on Jesse's website and order this book. If you know someone who has epilepsy, might encourage them. And even if anyone, this would be quite an uplifting book. And one of the reasons for my show is for people to know they're not alone in this world. We all think we're alone because we're afraid to say how we feel because we're afraid of being judged and stigmatized. But we need to stop that. If you have a story that you want to share and you came through on the other side, like Jesse Fiedor, come on my show. Contact me through PassionWorldRadio.com. And my email is Sloan, that's my married name, SLOAN, Betsy31@gmail.com. If you have a story you want to share to inspire, motivate people, I want you on my show. And I want to thank Jeannie White, who's the station manager, Passion World Talk Radio, produces the show, writes the blog. Please read the blog because the information about Jesse Fiedor will be in the blog. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening, subscribing. It's free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy. I am on iHeart, Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, and that's off the top of my head. And I have phenomenal guests on. This year. Next year, I already have lined up through, I believe, May, phenomenal guests that you don't want to miss. And when you share this show, you are helping people. You are helping me carrying out my mission and vision that I promised I would still do in my husband's memory. Now I'm going to get verklempt. And everyone who knows, who's been listening to me, knows that I promised Matt that I would share his story, but not just that, but continue on with my mission and vision, and that is to help people, to let them know, again, you're not alone. There are resources out there to help you, and that's what I want people to know. That my show has, it's about resources. And if you are struggling, it is December, can't believe it. This is the time of year where there's trouble with depression. People get depressed because of holidays. Folks, if you are struggling, I know the struggle is real. Please consult with your primary care physician for mental health services. If you are a senior citizen and you live in the States, go to your senior center. I get free counseling from my senior center. Sometimes we don't know about resources in our own backyard. Go for counseling. It is okay to not be okay. And it's okay to say, I need help. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength to know that you realize that you need help. And we all need help at some time. And that's what I want to say. I'm a big mental health advocate. I can't help it. I keep saying the same things over because I want people to know it's okay to reach out to others. We can't always do it alone. And you don't have to do it alone. And that's what I want you all to know, wherever you live in the world. And I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. And if it can't be happy, then I hope it's peaceful. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you can be anything, to please be kind, shine your light bright, because if we all were kind and shined our light bright, this would be a much happier, brighter world. And we sure do need that now. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion World Talk Radio. So we chat again. Be safe, and I hope you are well. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.